Good morning. I'm sorry, I'm tired. Welcome to the Board of Behavioral Sciences. Today is May 9th. It is 8:35, and we are at the Hilton Los Angeles in Universal City on the 4th floor in Salon A and B. Can we please call for a quorum?
Good morning. Renee Launer. Dr. Christine Whitlisbach.
Here.
Dr. Peter Chu.
Here.
Deborah Brown.
Here.
Betty Conley.
Here.
Christina Long.
Here.
Dr. Leah Brew.
Here.
Samara Ashley.
Here.
Jonathan Maddox.
Here.
And for the record, Sarita Coley and Max Disposti are absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. At this particular time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Judge Goldsby, and he will conduct the hearings, and then we will come back as a board and go into closed session and discuss these cases. So, Judge Goldsby?
All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to go through a series of petitions. Let me explain a little bit about the hearing process. We'll go one by one, obviously. Each one will have its own separate hearing. It's going to be recorded by a court reporter. You'll testify under oath, and each of the board members will have a chance to ask you some questions. There are deputy attorneys general here. One will handle each petition. They're not going to gang up on you, so they'll be separated. So one will take one, and the other will take the others. They will also have some questions. They'll have some introductory remarks, and you'll be able to state your case and present any evidence that you've brought with you. You'll be able to testify. You'll be able to present some documents if you brought any documents. We'll mark those documents. We'll entertain entering them into evidence. The attorney generals do have the opportunity to question the admissibility of the documents, as might I. But let's go ahead and start. We're going to begin with Matthew Woodbury. Is Matthew Woodbury present? You want to step forward and have a seat over here? Have a seat in either of these chairs. And if you could push the button on the microphone to make sure you're being heard.
Is that right?
That's good.
Good.
We can. It's picking up. All right. Are you ready? All right. Let's go ahead and open the hearing. So the hearing is open now in the matter of Matthew D. Woodbury. The case number is 2002-015-000-222. The OAH number is 2018-040274. This is a petition before the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and today is May 9th, 2018. The hearing is being conducted in Universal City, California, and my name is Matthew Goldsby. I'm the administrative law judge for the hearing. Let me get appearances, please.
Good morning, Your Honor. Melissa Tyner, Deputy Attorney General, appearing on behalf of the people of the state of California pursuant to Government Code Section 11522.
All right, and sir, can you state your name and spell it for the record?
Yes, Matthew Woodbury, Matthew Woodbury.
All right. Were you expected to be represented by an attorney today?
No.
All right. Before we went on the record, I gave a very brief description of how the hearing is going to proceed. Do you have any questions about the preamble that I gave, or what's expected of you today?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well then, let's go ahead and proceed with the hearing. Ms. Tyner, did you want to make an opening statement?
I'd like to start by marking the exhibits for identification. And then
All right.
move on. I'd like to mark for identification and offer into evidence as Exhibit 1 the following: the petition for modification of penalty, the decision and order dated September 26, 2016, the notice of hearing, and the license history certification. Your Honor and the petitioner have been provided with a copy of the same set of this exhibit.
Mr. Woodbury, you've received a copy of this?
Yes.
Do you have any objections to it coming into evidence?
Not at all.
All right, Exhibit 1 is admitted. Ms. Tyner, would you like to proceed from here?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
This is a petition for modification for probation of Matthew D. Woodbury. The petitioner was issued a clinical social worker license on June 5th, 2000. The disciplinary action taken against the petitioner's license was due to a misdemeanor conviction for driving under the influence of alcohol and dangerous use of alcohol on December 8th, 2014. The board filed an accusation on October 6, 2015, and adopted the decision after rejection, which immediately revoked his license, stayed the revocation, and placed the petitioner on probation for 4 years, with optional and standard terms and conditions effective October 26, 2016. Today, the petitioner is requesting modification of his probation. Specifically, he is seeking to eliminate his biological fluids testing, dependency support program, and his psychotherapy requirements. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to the board for questions if we're ready.
Well, let's do this. I'd like to give Mr. Woodbury a chance to give some testimony so that the board has a little context before they start asking questions. So, Mr. Woodbury, let me have you raise your right hand to be sworn, please.
Is
I am, for the record, his right hand is in a sling, so let me have you raise your left hand.
Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you give here today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, since you're not represented by counsel, you can put your hand down.
Okay.
I'm going to let you testify in whatever order and whatever sequence you want to give in narrative style. As Ms. Tyner said, the board is going to have some questions for you after you're done testifying, but why don't you go ahead and tell the board what it is you think is important relating to your petition.
One quick thing I want to just respond to is when you were specifying my request for modification, you mentioned therapy, and when I listed my requests, I specifically said mandated therapy. I think you said required, so it's kind of the same thing.
And
But
Mr.
anyway,
Woodbury, just as a matter of
Yeah.
formality, direct your comments to
okay,
the board.
I'm sorry.
You can refer to counsel as counsel, but we try to avoid any direct
Gotcha.
confrontation.
I guess my point is that I'm doing really well with my therapist. I appreciate her beyond words, and I don't intend to stop therapy. I would love to have that process be on my own terms and not a mandated situation. That's I just want that to be clear. Anyway, it feels a little a little allegorical, me sitting here today with this sling. I'm 2 weeks post revision rotator cuff surgery, and it's funny, well, not funny, but 4 years ago, coming up on 4 years ago, I had this DUI, and I had my first rotator cuff surgery just weeks after the DUI. And what's been really compelling for me is having this process 2 weeks ago versus having this process 4 years ago. It's a whole different rodeo, and it makes me realize that I am in such a different place emotionally and psychologically, and in terms of managing stress and pain and discomfort and those things. And so it's just interesting to me that I'm sitting here kind of post 4 years, a little bit Groundhog's Day, but not really, fortunately. So, in case anyone was curious about what's going on here, I wanted to mention that. I was a few days ago just reviewing the decision after rejection from 2016, and I was reading through the evidence of rehabilitation section, and there was, and it sort of went through the matters of mitigation on my part, and sort of summed, there was a sentence at the very end that kind of summed it up by saying, respondent submitted little evidence of rehabilitation. After his arrest, he enrolled in therapeutic counseling and couples counseling. He does yoga and drinks less. And that kind of stung because I've done so much, and this is a couple of years ago, but today my life is so far beyond drinking less and doing yoga, and I really hope that I can convey that to you guys today in a compelling and authentic way. I feel like I have a unique-ish challenge because what happened to me on July 4th, 2014 was, in my mind, so tragic and so irresponsible and so humiliating and so obviously indicative of a person with a substance abuse problem. My therapist and I were talking recently about the sort of old adage in the medical field that, if you're in California and you hear hoofbeats, think horse, not zebra. And I'm hoping that I can, in whatever way, convince you that there's a zebra sitting here in front of you today. There's so much that was going on in my life then, and I've had so many weaknesses and challenges and issues to work through and work around, but alcohol dependence is not one of them. What I did that day was the biggest mistake of my life. It was, I think, an aggressively self-destructive act. If I'd been at a barbecue where they were serving heroin, I probably would have overdosed on heroin instead of ethanol. And so I just want to make it clear that alcohol is not a provocative. I don't have a provocative relationship with alcohol. I wildly misused it and abused it on that day. I understand completely that the board's purpose today is not to punish me. I know that the board's purpose has not been over the last years to punish me. I know that it's to protect the public, and I respect the work you do, and I really truly do. When I was a very young man, I engaged in therapy for my very first time, very naively, and things happened in that relationship that were so wildly inappropriate, if not illegal. And if you guys had been involved, you would have skewered this person. And I see you as guardians of the public, and I believe truly that mental health professionals have a lot of potential to harm. We don't wield scalpels like surgeons, but we sort of kind of do figuratively, and I just know that there's so much harm that can be done. And so I just want you to know that I respect what you're doing, and I respect your inquiries and your questions, and I respect this process. I'd be disingenuous if I said that there haven't been moments when I've been frustrated and angry and felt like my probation terms have been misguided. But I also appreciate that none of you have crystal balls in front of you, and maybe in the next couple of iterations of iPhones we will, but we don't have that ability. And I know that you're limited to this stuff, and you've got to do your due diligence. So I want to just put that out there. Other thing I wanted to mention was the topic around remorse comes up a lot between me and my therapist in discussion of the events of that day. And I just to put it in context, for me and my experience, I grew up in a very religious Mormon family, and I knew from a very young age that there was something terribly wrong with me as I perceived it at the time. And I spent my life kind of overcompensating to be undetected, to be good, to not cause trouble, to not disappoint. And, I grew up as a kid never having gone to the principal's office. I don't think I was ever officially grounded. I always brought home good report cards, and as I got older, I served a 2-year Mormon mission in the Cook Islands, and I got my Eagle Scout, and I graduated from Brigham Young University, and did all these things that were expected of me, and did them vigilantly. And it's at the ripe old age of 51, that still lingers with me, and it certainly I've come a long way in therapy, but I just want you to know that on that day, July 4th, 2014, when I was arrested for the first time in my life, the first time I've ever been in trouble. I mean, I have never been in trouble at school or home, or, and it had a profound impact on me, and one that I will never fully recover from and never shake. And the reason I tell you this is I want you to know how deeply my remorse and shame is felt for those actions. And that's all I have for now. Thanks.
All right, well, thank you. Before I turn the matter over for some questioning from others in the room, let me just make sure I'm clear procedurally what it is you're asking for, because it looks like you're not asking for termination of probation, just modification. Is that correct?
I would ask for termination if I could, but I understand that I'm not in that time frame. And I.
So you're going to remain on, you understand you're going to remain on probation until 2020, it looks like.
Right, or
October.
until I'm able to, until I'm eligible to petition for
Come back and
early
petition.
termination. And I thought it was a little audacious of me to ask for the 3 primary terms of my probation to be forgiven. Forgiven.
So I understand, and on the drug and alcohol testing, you still agree that you'll be bound to the term that you'll abstain from alcohol.
If that's what the board expects and requests, absolutely, which I.
All right. I just wanted to be clear so that I was understanding what your petition
Okay.
was. Let me now turn it over. First, let me ask the Attorney General, do you have any questions for the petitioner?
I'll start with one question. Have you completed your criminal probation stemming from the 2014 conviction?
Yes.
I
I think that was in the fall of 2017.
I will postpone my questions for now and defer to the board for questions.
All right, so let's turn to the board now. Is it Renee Lahner?
Yes,
Do you have any questions for the petitioner?
yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Good morning.
Hi.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions just around, thank you for explaining how you see your relationship with alcohol. When you were arrested at a pretty high BAC,
Mhm.
it was .23, and you talked about not having a pathological relationship with alcohol prior to that point. So if you would just help me understand kind of how you drank
Yeah.
as an adult to that point, what your habits were, and how you managed to get a BAC that high.
Good question. The way I drank as an adult was seldom, never on my own. I would nurse a drink at social gatherings. I've never enjoyed the taste of alcohol. I've never liked the way it takes me from being alert and connected and participating to groggy and I kind of want to go to bed now. It just doesn't, it's just not compelling to me, and it never has been. And again, the flavor, the taste, it's like the connoisseur of wine that I am. A good wine is a wine where you don't taste alcohol. That's kind of my naivete when it comes to drinking. But what happened that day, a number of things. One was that I was in crisis. Another is that this was a barbecue, a 4th of July barbecue that started in the afternoon, and we were drinking sangria and beer, and there was just no means of sort of tallying or monitoring and knowing exactly how much I had been drinking. I wasn't eating, I was drinking, and I'm assuming it had a cumulative effect on me throughout the day, but the main thing is that things happened at the party that exacerbated crisis I was in my relationship. And I drank aggressively. I drank to get drunk. And I don't know else how to say it. I was trying to get out of a place or to a place, and I kept drinking. I had no idea that I was going to be in a situation of getting in a car. That was completely not at all in my mind, because I had been driven by somebody else, and I sort of thought I was safe to just do what I was doing, and didn't turn out that way.
Thank you. One other question. In terms of AA, you talked about you've been going because it's been mandated. How have you felt about that, and how did you feel you fit into the group?
That was really very difficult for me at the beginning. I was feeling like an imposter. I started out going to a different AA meeting I go to them twice a week, and I started out going down the list and hitting different meetings every single time, because I didn't want to be incorporated into the culture. I didn't want to answer questions about my recovery date, and I was very resistant, but I was going. And over time, I got more comfortable with certain groups, usually larger groups. And the other thing is, I discovered that there's such a thing as meditation 12-step groups, which was kind of a godsend to me, because meditation's a big deal for me, and being able to attend with that focus was really, really helpful to me. And for the past several months, I've been going to almost exclusively these meditation groups.
Would you keep going to them if the requirement were lifted?
No, I wouldn't.
Thank you.
All right, let's turn to Christine Whittlesbach. Do you have any questions?
No,
No
thank you.
questions? All right, Peter Chu, do you have any questions?
Yes. Thanks for coming, and congratulations on your progress. So let's say, a couple of years from now, you're off probation. Then is it likely for you to drink again socially?
I would be disingenuous if I said that I was never going to pick up an alcoholic beverage again. If I could see myself having drinking the cup at a Seder or toasting at a wedding, but in terms of going drinking, having drinks, drinking for the sake of drinking, I have no interest. I kind of feel like that experience for me was like a booster shot of antabuse. I don't know. I'm just not. I don't have a desire to put that toxin in my body.
But I guess what I'm getting at is, what if the same situation comes up, that you're under tremendous stress? What guarantee do you have that you would not get yourself drunk?
The guarantee that I have is that I am in a very, very different place in my life with a very different set of coping skills, Subsequent to that experience, I discovered mindfulness, meditation, yoga, and I practice those things daily. And oftentimes I practice those things in a moment of, excuse me, in a moment of distress or anxiety where I need to take a different turn emotionally than I would have in the old days, where I would just wallow in it or stuff it until it exploded. And I deal with my emotions, I regulate my emotions, and I'm constantly working on those skills, and I'm pretty confident.
What other support system do you have other than from your inner strength?
I I have a partner of 13 years who has truly become my best friend since this experience. He was very much involved. He has made, he's a drinker. He grew up drinking. He likes to drink. He, very different background than mine. But this experience has changed him a lot. He refers to me as I'm his surrogate DUI. And he's learned a lot. And he's really partnered with me in this experience. And we have so many common interests and things that bond us together that have nothing to do with alcohol. We've taken up a serious hobby of succulent gardening, and we're actually doing landscaping together professionally, kind of a weekend job. And he's my co-pilot. He's my rock. But aside from him, friends, family, coworkers, the thing that's been really rewarding about this whole process for me is that, as a kid, when I was trying to manage getting through life without being discovered and known, because I really had a sense of, I did not have a sense of unconditional love or unconditional positive regard as a kid. And I did everything in my power to be perfect so that I could maintain at any cost positive regard. And some of that has followed me in my adulthood in relationships with work and friends and strangers. But having had this experience, this humiliating experience, and having shared it with people that I work with family members, with friends, and experiencing love and support in response to this story has been profoundly moving and educational to me in terms of relying on a support system and knowing that I can be imperfect and I can make mistakes and I'm still okay. And sorry, I kind of rambled on, but I hope I kind of answered your question.
You did. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Let's turn to the chair. Deborah Brown, do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
All right. Betty Connolly, do you have any questions?
No, I just want to thank you for coming in and for all the work you've done and coming in and speaking with us.
Thank you.
Good
Okay.
morning.
That's
Morning.
Christina Wong.
Sorry, I jumped the gun.
That's quite all right. Just want to make sure the record is clear who you are. So, Christina Wong, do you have any questions?
Yes. Welcome to LA. And so I just wonder, do you have a sobriety date?
I don't. I don't. I don't because I stopped drinking before October 26th. I mean, for your purposes, my sobriety date is definitely October 26, 2016. But I stopped drinking months before that. I correct myself, years before that, because I didn't start this with you guys for, 2.5 years after the DUI? After the DUI, I had no interest in touching anything with alcohol. Subsequent to that, over those years, there were times when I went to dinner and I had a glass of wine. I went to several weddings and just sort of participated socially, but didn't really drink. Didn't ever have more than what was served one time to me, and no interest.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. So so you talked about that the resistance of participating in the in the dependency support group. And so how long do you see that that resistance been going on before you found the meditation AA?
The resistance is still there. If I'm going to be honest, it's 2 hours a week of my life, and it's much better spent than a lot of things I could do. I'm sure, I think I get more out of going to these meetings than I would watching Netflix for those 2 hours. But it's not the appropriate place for me to be. I'd rather go to a meditation group. I respect AA. I respect the 12 steps. I feel like I know that program is an absolute lifesaver for many, many, many people. But it's just not a fit for me. There's been many times when I've heard compelling talks from people. There's principles that I can certainly apply to my life, but it's AA, and I'm not there.
That's fine. Thank you. I have 2 more questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. So so you talked about that you were you were raised in an LDS church. So so in the LDS church, that's one of the principles is actually no alcohol. So can you explain a little bit, how you start drinking alcohol and how long it has been?
Before I answer that, I was just thinking, I think that's another challenge for me with 12 steps, is there's so much God and so much, male pronoun using of him and he, and he's doing, and just things that sort of push me away, because I've come a long way from that sort of patriarchal tradition that I grew up with. So that's another reason it's never felt like a great fit for me. But boy, I I grew up with the word of wisdom, a very important part of my religious upbringing. And a lot of that is still in me. I mean, you can take the boy out of the Mormon church, but there's still some Mormon church in this boy, you know. And I think one of the most compelling reasons for that keep me disinterested from drinking is just knowing and believing that it's toxic. It's you know, I think about it like, would I take a sip of Drano, even though a sip of Drano is not going to kill me, but it's going to make me feel good? No, I'm not going to do that, you know. And I'm not going to eat meat with nitrates in it. I just, it's taking care of my body, especially the older I get. I'm about to turn 55, which let's just round that up to 60. So I'm about to turn 60.
Wait, no. Don't go so fast.
And
It's not a math problem.
I like life, and I have lots of interests, and a lot of those interests have really resurfaced since over the last 4 years. And I want to play, and I want to feel good, and I want to participate, and I do not want to smoke a cigarette or drink alcohol or any of those things. And
So I guess my question is really about how did you start? Because
how did I start?
yeah,
I started, this is a little embarrassing. You know, I didn't come out until I was almost 30 as a gay man. And I moved to San Francisco for graduate school. And I was here for several years applying for graduate schools. And here I was, a 30-year-old man, kind of dealing with the pressures of drinking culture as though I was a freshman in high school, you know, and it's a little embarrassing, but that's what it was. And alcohol, much more then than it is now, was so embedded in gay culture. And you know, if you wanted to participate, if you wanted to be where people are and where the fun is, and that's how it started. And fortunately, it never became habitual. Like I told you before, I never had alcohol in my house. I've never been okay, we're sitting down to dinner, let's open the wine. I've never been that kind of a drinker, but that's kind of where it started.
that makes sense. So one last question. So you missed 2 testing. So what happened? Can you just explain? And that's my last question, I promise.
The 2 testings, I know this isn't a great excuse, but the 2 testings that I missed were Saturdays. And what I missed was calling in to the you know, first thing I do when I get out of bed is shuffle to the computer and call click into the network and see if I get the red flag or green flag. And there were, I think, more than 2, to be honest, but there were several times when, because testing was never done on Saturday, and checking in was a mere muscle memory, there were a couple times when I failed to do that, and and then didn't realize until after 5 o'clock when the cutoff time is, and and it was just human error.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Leah Brew, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. I guess I want to start with congratulations with how far you've come, not just in terms of your growth in the last few years, but also from someone who grew up in the LDS church to finding some self-acceptance.
Thank you.
And I say that kind of with some context because I'm struck by the request to give up the psychotherapy requirement. And as I listen to you, and please correct my perception, but my perception is you had said you can't take the LDS out of the boy, right? Like I think of the young version of you and it's still kind of there. And that if you don't have these terms, then you can sort of go back to being that good child. So I don't know if that's what it feels like with the psychotherapy part, because you said you would continue. It's very useful. It's productive. I can hear how the AA is not helpful. I know the burden of having to log in every morning for the testing, but
Yeah.
Is that an accurate perception or is there something I'm missing?
So are you asking, is the good little boy saying that I would want to continue therapy because that's what...
No, the good little boy wants to get rid of all the terms that show up so that you can look good to yourself.
Oh, gosh. I think it's more than that.
Okay.
Particularly the testing. Oh boy.
No, just the therapy. That's
Oh,
all I'm asking
okay.
about. Just the therapy. The other two I understand. Why give up the therapy?
Oh, why give up the therapy? Oh, I don't want to give up the therapy yet.
The term.
The term.
Right. Do you see why I'm confused? I'm going to keep going to therapy, but I want you to give up the term because I just want to do it on my own.
I
Like
hear
you don't trust that you would do it on your own.
I hear you. My therapist and I have talked several times about, what about the work we're doing, and it's really come. We've done a ton of work around helping me cope with this process and helping me sort of with cognitive restructuring around what this all means and how it's really not. I mean, there's been times when I just felt tempted to toss it in because, particularly with the fluid testing, but to put it in context and to focus on how incredibly blessed and fortunate I am that I still am able to do my job and that I'm supported by this process in continuing to do my job. And the fact that that thing happened to me without anybody else being involved or hurt. And I mean, there's just, I have so much to be grateful for. And so we've dealt with a lot of that, but we are dealing with a lot. We're getting the longer we work together, the more we're able to sort of go a little more psychodynamic and kind of talk about things that are pretty deep-seated for me. When I asked for the elimination of mandated therapy, I was just saying, looking forward to when I can do things for myself, take care of myself for myself, and not for anybody else, but for myself.
So you can't do it for yourself and someone else?
Oh, I can, and I have.
Okay. All right, that's all. Just wanted to check
But-
with that. Somebody once told me maturity is when you do the right thing, not because, despite your parents agreeing with that.
Right,
You're right.
right.
So I think you've answered my question. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, let's turn to Samora Ashley. Do you have
I
any
don't have any questions.
questions? Jonathan Matix, do you have any questions?
Good morning. Thank you
Good
for coming
morning.
in today. And thank you for all the work that you've done around sort of addressing this issue and ensuring that your life is structured and full of supports and things of that nature. Here's a question, and this is more of a comment just to start, and then we can go from there. It seems like if we as the board were to grant what you were asking, then for all intents and purposes, there would be no teeth in your probation. You would just be kind of skateboarding until your end date in 2020, and then things would just go away. And so that's sort of the way I'm kind of viewing what you're requesting. I mean, does that seem accurate? Because you've done all the other requirements, there would just be no probation, no fluid testing, and no attendance at the dependency meetings. Would you have a similar? Am I talking too fast? So if we were to remove the probation requirements that you're asking, there would be no teeth in what it is in your probation requirements. There'd be no psychotherapy to support your emotional growth. There'd be no dependency meetings to sort of build accountability and garner insight into, your alcohol use. And there also would be no fluid testing. So there'd be no objective way for us to determine whether or not you were or were not drinking. So it seems
Right.
like there'd be nothing left. Would you agree with that?
That the metaphor of skateboarding for the rest of the time doesn't resonate for me because I'm doing lots of things and will continue to do a lot of
Sure.
things to in terms of self-care and growth and I guess the way I think of it is that I'm not here for the probation terms. The probation terms are there for me. And if a probation term really isn't serving me or necessarily protecting the public, then why continue that term? And you don't know this. I hope you kind of get a sense of it, but I know it to fiber of my being that I am safe with the public, that I do good work, that I do not need to go to meetings twice a week, and I do not need to go to fluid testing sessions for the safety of the public. I really don't. I don't need to continue psychotherapy for the safety of the public. I need to continue it for me, and I want to continue it for me. But if we're here to sort of figure out if I'm a danger or not to the public, I personally just don't believe that those activities are relevant at this point in my life.
No, thank you. That's actually very helpful. So my next question would be, looking back at the incident in July, one of the things that your paperwork says is that you had gotten into an argument, and I'm not sure if Mark is your partner, that you guys had gotten into a pretty significant argument on the way to the barbecue, and based on the way you have managed maybe your emotions over time, you chose to drink to sort of either calm yourself or just deal with the situation that was going on. I'm wondering, what have you learned about the way you have kind of historically managed sort of difficult emotions that will serve you to use alcohol in a way that doesn't put you at risk for driving under the influence? Like, what have you learned about how you manage anger or shame or whatever it was that you were experiencing that day without alcohol?
Well, prior to that day, I managed most things for about 50 years by just bucking up and stuffing in and putting my shoulder to the wheel and just getting through it. And that obviously wasn't working for me. It's kind of incredible to me how long I was able to function before something bad happened. But so that was my primary, my primary solution was just to stuff it. Talking about it, bringing it up, confronting it, ran the risk of chasing a person away or disappointing a person or presenting an unattractive side of myself, you know. Subsequent to the DUI, I talk about things. Mark and my communication. I mean, we laugh about how we weren't even communicating. I mean, I was partnered with a roommate in a sense, you know, and we talk and we process conflicts, and it's just such a different relationship, and it's similar with other people in my life. I'm just more open. I'm more vulnerable, and okay with that.
So it sounds like therapy has really helped you be able to stop hiding, I would say, from your own emotional world. You're able to sort of look inside and sort of figure out, okay, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I need to do, and this is how I'll move forward in a productive way, it sounds like.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. That's kind of what therapy's about. So I'm glad to hear that that's
Kind of works.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Ms. Tyner, any questions?
I have no further questions.
All right. Any closing remarks from Ms. Tyner?
The people have completed their presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Woodbury, anything you'd like to say before we close the hearing?
I just want to thank you again for hearing me and considering my situation, and I think that's it.
All right, then we will conclude the hearing. We'll go off the record. All right, thank you very much. You're free to go.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Well, do we need to go back on the record? Is this something?
Do we need to go about the stuff? Sorry. Yes.
What is it that you want to?
Okay.
Hold on. Let's go back on the record. We're back on the record. Mr. Woodbury is remembering there is something he wanted to present.
I thought I was going to be here in March, and I got bumped off. I guess there were too many other. The schedule is too full or something. So the original packet that I provided is a little outdated, and what I've added is that in the original packet there's my 2016 performance review from work. This one has my most recent 2017 performance review, and it's also I was sort of surprised to learn that the psychological evaluation that was prescribed for me doesn't enter the record or isn't even necessarily reviewed and taken into consideration. And I feel like that evaluation really kind of got me, and I feel like she was kind of on the mark with who I am and what's been going on with me.
So tell us exactly what it is you want to present.
I'm sorry. I want to present the psychological evaluation from Dr. Aaron.
Have you shown a copy to Ms. Tyner?
Yes.
Yes, we do have a copy of that.
Yeah. So
you-
Craig had told me that for whatever reason these extra documents didn't make their way into the packet for the board, and asked me to make my own packets. So I made packets.
Ms. Tyner, do you have any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Do you have
I do.
copies for each board member?
I do. Thank you.
Your Honor?
Yeah.
Last time, we've had a prior hearing that the eval did not get entered in as an exhibit, and so we were unable to talk about it in closed session. So I just want to make sure that this becomes an exhibit so that we can legally talk about it and and use it.
All right, well, I'll take one, too. I need a copy. I will mark this as Exhibit A
Thank you.
and admit it into evidence.
Thank you very much.
Anything else, Mr. Woodbury?
No, that's it. Thanks so much.
All right, so the matter is under submission, and we're back off the record. All right, thank you very much. Let's just take a stand-up stretch kind of break, and we'll move on to the next one. We'll now turn to Jessica Plancich. Is she present? You want to step forward? And while she's approaching, that turned into more of a break than I was really counting on. I want to try and keep things moving along here. So, and we've got a few people to get to. So we'll next time really just take a stretch break and then take what I'll call a pee-pee break after Emily Mann. Okay, so we'll now move on with Ms. Plancich. All right, let's open the record. So the hearing now is open in the matter of Jessica K. Plancich. The case number is MF 2014-310. The OAH number is 2018040271. This is a petition before the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and today is May 9th, 2018. The hearing is being conducted in Universal City, California. My name is Matthew Goldsby, the Administrative Law Judge for the hearing. Let me get appearances, please.
Good morning, Melissa Tyner.
Good morning. And
Good morning, Melissa Tyner, Deputy Attorney General, appearing on behalf of the people of California pursuant to Government Code 11522.
thank you. And can you state and spell your name, please?
Yes, Jessica K. Plancich, Jessica Kay Plancich.
All right. Were you expecting to be represented by an attorney today?
No.
All right. Were you present when I explained how these hearings proceed?
Yes,
Do you have any questions about
I do
what's
not.
expected of you today?
I do not.
All right. Ms. Tyner, did you want to make an opening statement?
I would like to make an opening statement, but we'll start with marking the exhibits
Very
first.
good.
I'd like to mark for identification and offer into evidence Exhibit 1 as the following documents. The petition for modification of penalty, the decision and order dated in June 2015, the notice of hearing, and the license history certification. Your Honor and the petitioner have been provided with a copy of the same set of this exhibit.
All right. I've received the document as described by counsel. I'm marking it as Exhibit 1. Ms. Plancich, do you have any objections to Exhibit 1?
I do not.
All right. Exhibit 1 is admitted. Do you have any other opening remarks you'd like to make?
Yes, Your Honor, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
This is a petition for the early termination of probation for Jessica K. Plancich. The petitioner was issued a marriage and family therapist license on or about April 10th, 2003. The disciplinary action taken by the board was in response to substantiated claims that the petitioner was grossly negligent and incompetent in her supervision of an associate, violated board regulations, aided and abetted the unlicensed practice, behaved in a way that recklessly caused emotional harm, conducted supervision of an intern that violated the law, and permitted an associate to perform services beyond her competence. The board filed an accusation on December 2nd, 2014, and adopted the stipulated settlement and disciplinary order, which immediately revoked her license, stayed the revocation, and placed the petitioner on 4 years probation with optional and standard terms and conditions effective October 16th, 2015. Today, the petitioner is requesting early termination of her probation.
All right. Ms. Plantis, did you want to testify today and tell us why you're here?
Yes, please.
Then let me have you raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you give here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, so why don't you tell the board what it is in whatever sequence you want to tell us, what you think is important in support of your petition.
Thank you. And I just want to thank all of you for the opportunity to be here today. Very grateful. I first would like to submit some exhibits for consideration.
Why don't you tell us what they are?
There are 3 character references attesting to my both professional and personal character and background, and as well as a letter from the supervisor that I've been working with during these 2.5 years about the work we've done together, and then the series of a copy of the series of continuing education, remedial education certificates that I've completed.
Have you shown the Deputy Attorney General those documents?
I have.
Ms.
Yeah.
Tyner, do you have any objections to those being presented to the board?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, and you made copies for each board member?
There's 2 copies. I wasn't told that I needed to.
We'll pass it around. I'm going to need one of them, though. And I will mark all of the documents collectively as Exhibit A, and I'll admit that into evidence. Is there any other documents that you wanted to present?
No.
All right, while that's going around, why don't you continue to tell us why you think your probation should be terminated?
Thank you. In the end, I really believe that I've garnered the lessons and the insight and the growth that I've intended to gather from this experience, very sincerely and wholeheartedly. As a result of going through this, I now practice much greater discernment about who I work with, much more astute clinical judgment, greater respect and understanding of the guidelines pertaining to supervision of interns. And maybe most importantly, I've been humbled and given an opportunity to understand where I overrode my instincts, my own clinical instincts and my own judgment in an effort to support a budding intern. If it's okay, I'd like to just provide a little bit of a background and how I came to this point and what I've gathered. Thank you. I started really early as an MFT. I pursued graduate school at 21, and I spent 10 years in the realm of community mental health. I built programs for LA County as a contracted community mental health agency to build wraparound programs and intensive community mental health work for the highest of the individuals requiring the highest of care, to stabilize foster youth and their families in their communities, providing the interns that I hired and trained would go into the community and provide individual therapy, collateral therapy, family therapy, psychoeducation, mentorship, and case management, life skill building, basically whatever it took to help stabilize them and prevent recidivism into the juvenile justice system and into higher levels of care. I was responsible for helping build these programs, for training interns in these programs, and was promoted to a director so that I then supervised the supervisors who were doing this. And prior to the intern in question, I had only taken on interns in my private practice who had been through this rigorous kind of training. And the diligence and the the containment that it takes in order to provide such high levels of care and to prevent misconduct in the community. This was the exception. The one and only exception that I've made to that was a friend of a family friend. And she had not received this kind of training. And in retrospect, not only did I misjudge her clinical capacity, but I misjudged my ability to properly train and supervise her in order to avoid misconduct. To just be even more vulnerable in that way, I think that I had become cavalier. I think that I had been highly successful in the clinic, the several clinics that I worked at. I had been promoted. I had done really good work. I had received accolades and praise for all of my work. And this was a lot of misjudgment on my part. My ability to take somebody who needed more support than I was capable of providing. And though I attempted to provide the oversight she required, I fell short of that. And that's obvious in the conduct that she then and the services that she then provided with the client in question. And I overrode my best judgment. I overrode my clinical judgment and my personal instincts and my intuition. And I realized that not only did I give her too much freedom to provide services with a client of this diagnosis, that not only should I have monitored her more closely to prevent this kind of misconduct and dual relationship, that upon learning of this client's need, I should have mandated a higher level of care for her. I should have suspended this intern's license or work with this client when her intern number lapsed because of non-payment. And I should have, of course, mandated that this client pay me and then issue this intern a W-2. And for all of this, I am incredibly sorry for any harm I've done. In the past 2.5 years, I sincerely believe that I've applied these lessons in my life. Not only have I not been supervising interns, I have maintained the minimal number of clients necessary to fulfill the terms of my probation and to continue upholding my license. But I have no plans to supervise interns in the future. I believe that I am not at risk to the public and to the consumer. I've only maintained about 1 to 2 clients at a time, and I've done so very intentionally because I began this process when my daughter was only a few months old. And I've taken this opportunity to really regroup in my life and rethink my direction and where I want to take my professional career. And I'd really like the opportunity to be given the freedom to do so at this point, despite the fact that fulfilling these terms has been a really big challenge, not only for myself, but for my family, my young family. Driving up to 2 hours for supervision every week. The long days of educational courses and being away from my daughter. But I've done so consistently and dutifully because this is important to me. It's important to me to be in good standing with a profession and a license that has given me a lot over the past 20 years. I guess it's also important to me that the board know that even if these terms are terminated at this point, that this doesn't mean the end of my dedication to my own personal growth, that I have engaged in psychotherapy ever since, and various like workshops and teachers and mentors and guides and supporters in my life ever since I became a trainee at age 21. And I plan to do so forever. I can't even imagine not doing it as a person who's in a helping profession. I have very strong support system in the form of my family and my faith. I have a strong group of professional colleagues, as well as personal friends and extended community who holds me accountable, whom I look to like provide important reflection for me so that I can continue to grow. And I plan to do so for all of my days. Even though this has been a very difficult experience for me, personally and professionally, I'm very, very grateful for the lessons I've learned, and I'm hopeful that the dismissal of these terms will allow me to devote my attention to raising my family and to focus on the next steps in my life. Thank you.
All right, we'll turn to questioning now. Ms. Tyner, do you have any questions?
I will postpone my questions for now and defer to the board.
All right, we'll get back to you at the end. And Renee Lahner, do you have any questions for the petition?
Other side this time.
We can't hear you.
Thank you very much for coming in and for sharing the significant amount of work that you've done since probation started. And you've addressed some of the questions that I would have had. The one that struck me, I think, as I was reading through it, was when the client started to complain to you about the treatment by the intern. So I'm just wondering what was, supervisors don't always, clients don't always have that kind of access to a supervisor, and supervisors often don't get that kind of information. So I was just wondering what that was like for you when she or he complained, and why that didn't serve as a huge red flag at the time.
It actually did serve as a huge red flag. When she contacted me, I spent a fair amount of time, and this isn't reflected in the records, but we spent a fair amount of time on the phone together, and I asked her very directly what she would like after this, how I could support this in remedying this process in any way. I offered to co-facilitate a termination session. I offered to provide her resources and referrals to other professionals. And in the end, she said, I don't need any of that. I feel like I'm pretty good right now. I just want her to become more professional. I followed up with a letter to her, basically reiterating all of the same in writing, and I never heard anything back from her. And on the other end of this conversation is when I started to investigate what happened with this intern, and I wrote up a complete plan of correction for her, and shortly thereafter terminated my supervising relationship with the intern.
That's very helpful, thank you.
Dr. Whittlespot, do you have any questions?
No.
Dr. Chu?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. I know it's not easy to talk about what happened, and you did acknowledge you could have done better. But reading through the record, I have some questions. Did you actually authorize your intern to become a wellness coach, even though the psychotherapy was necessary for the client? I mean, you know, I was not sure the answer when I read through the record.
I did an assessment with the intern about the client's level of care necessary at that time, and she had been stable for quite some time and not showing any signs of suicidality, danger to self or others, and it stabilized quite well. And when given the opportunity to terminate or even temporarily services or shift into another role, the client vehemently refused to work with anyone else and wanted to continue with this client or with this intern, excuse me. And so in retrospect, this was not a good decision because at any point this client could have required a higher level of care, even though she had been stabilized for quite a while. And I guess what I weighed in my head was the continuation of the relationship, which had been longstanding and also beneficial to this client, versus her termination abruptly because of the non-payment to the board, and what that could have done to the client in her care.
So on the related question, it's not clear to me anyway, reading through the record, you allowed the intern to receive payments directly from the patient. So could you explain a little bit more whether you in fact allowed that to happen?
I did, in fact, allow that to happen. Yes. And again, that was a transgression of mine. It was something I should not have allowed.
What were you thinking at that time when you allowed that to happen?
I was thinking that interns are already very underpaid in my perspective, and I wanted to give them the opportunity to be in control of their own finances and the management of them, rather than receive a W-2 and have to wait for payment from me and have to go through that process. And it seemed to me like an unnecessary step. I see in retrospect how important it is to provide a bit of a stopgap there, and especially for the client to understand that there are like administrative and clinical reasons for this. But in the moment, I was really looking at empowering my intern to have control of these things.
Thank you. Did you actually ask your therapist to write a letter to recommend for your early termination?
I don't have a therapist. I have a supervisor.
Oh, okay. I mean, then the
Yes.
supervisor.
I
So-
did. I asked her to write a letter. Yes, I did, to support this.
So she did.
She did.
Thank you.
I can read it. Okay.
All right, let's turn to the chair. Deborah Brown, do you have any questions?
I have a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
Just in the answer that you replied with Dr. Chu, you said the reason you allowed that money, the intern to take that money, was you were going to try to sidestep the law.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've noticed in your packet that you submitted, in your exhibit, that you have a lot of CE. And so can you tell me in a nutshell what you have learned from all of these classes that we ask you to go take, that you aren't above the law, and it is not your discretion of whether to obey the law or have your intern obey the law. It is the law. And so can you just give me very succinct explanation of what maybe you have garnered from all of these CEs in regard to your attitude then and your attitude now?
Yes. First, I will say that it was beneficial for me to attend in person versus online. I was one of those last sets of licensees who had to take an oral exam and sit in front of people such as yourself, and I think that there's something really valuable in that. And in sitting in a classroom and listening to an experience that's shared with me around the administrative reasons, the clinical reasons, the legal reasons for needing to have not only like layers of law, taxation, IRS, and such, but also for the clinical reasons to convey to the client that this person is in fact an intern, and that there is also a matter of oversight for the supervisor to know exactly what's coming in and going out, and a level of attention to that detail that's important in the supervision process, that I can say that it got in further. I received it on a deeper level rather than looking at it on a flat piece of paper as something that I should abide by. In those classrooms and in that experience, had now a deeper understanding and appreciation for why that is.
Thank you.
All right, Betty Connolly, do you have any questions?
Yeah, yes, I do. Thank you. In reading your quarterly reports, it looks like you're doing fairly minimal practice right now. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
The report from January said you'd only had 4 sessions in a quarter.
Yes.
So has that been the case since you were put on probation, that almost stopped practicing?
By intention, because not only was I at home with my daughter, with my infant, had I not been on probation, I probably wouldn't have been practicing, quite honestly.
Okay, so the stopping your practice wasn't necessarily because of being on probation.
No.
It just was because of life circumstances.
No, I gave birth May of 2015, and I would not have returned to work somewhat indefinitely until I felt ready to, and in fact did so prematurely in what I would have done otherwise because of wanting to satisfy these terms.
So are you ready to go back to work now, or are you anticipating resuming a semi-vibrant practice pretty soon?
No, actually, my intention is to clear this up with the board and be in good standing. I absolutely want to keep my license current. I draw upon this in basically everything that I do. It's informed so much of who I am, and as far as professionally goes, I'm pursuing a doctorate degree in a different field now, and want to be able to devote my time and my resources that way while still maintaining good standing with my license. Should I want to use it in the future, I would like the freedom to do so, but no, I don't intend to pick up and build a practice on the other side of this.
One last question that right now it's really fresh in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You've been doing all these CEs and you've been going to the supervised practice, and it's like right there.
Yeah.
But what if you don't practice for 10 years? What if you keep your license going and don't practice for 10 years?
Yeah.
What's going to be, and you don't have a crystal ball, I know you, but
Yeah.
what do you think is going to be your mindset when you resume it, or if you resume practice?
I guess I could spew off to you a laundry list of what I've learned in law and ethics and documentation classes. But I think much more deeply than that is the fact that for the past 2.5 years of my life, at a very vulnerable time in my life, that I have committed tremendous amounts of resource, and I take that very seriously. I take these lessons in very deeply. I don't take it for granted. I've been humbled, I've been really deeply humbled by this process, and I could never erase that. I can't undo that in my being. It's really deeply in there. And then second to that, I have a lot of colleagues around me whom I trust and can go to, and I would probably opt to do face-to-face CEUs from now on as well, because it's very easy to click a computer screen and walk away from it, and I know enough to pass those. It's different. To maintain my license, I will probably opt to go in person now because of what I've gotten out of it.
So it sounds like you definitely feel like you'd approach your practice, or certainly supervision, with a different, probably understanding of what your
Absolutely.
responsibilities were.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for coming in. And
Thank
for
you.
answering all those questions.
Right, Christina Long, do you have any questions?
Yes. I want to commend you for building a very, very successful private practice, and it looks like you were doing some really good job, in the mental health field. And serving that population is definitely not easy. So, but I do have some question for you. So I'm just trying to clarify, whether your private practice was simultaneously helping with the community mental health that you were talking about.
It was. However, the interns that I had in my private practice were not employed at the same location that I was a director in. They were separate.
So you have your position at the community mental health services, and then also with the private practice.
Yes.
And then the private practice, the staff that you employ work with the same setting with the
They
community.
had been trained in the same setting.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and that's how I knew and trusted that they had been prepared to and very rigorously trained.
So how many interns, when that incident happened, how many interns were you hired at that time?
In private practice, I may have had 4 at the
4.
time. Yeah.
So, did you have all of them, give them a give them a 1099 instead of a W-2? Or?
Correct.
Okay. So you were just caught at that time, otherwise
Correct.
you would have just, continuing. Right. Do you realize that, when the intern, submit the 1099 form, those intern hours won't count because they're independent contractor?
They chose to my knowledge, all of their intern, they've all become licensed except for this intern in question. So what they decided to do with their tax information,
Then you don't know.
I don't know and did not oversee.
So I want you to elaborate a little bit on, a statement that you made about your misjudgment and, overriding, your own personal instinct. Now, after a couple years, actually, after about, 4 years now, so what is, in hindsight now, what is your takeaway, from that misjudgment? I have an inherent belief in someone's ability to grow. That is just why I do this profession. I intrinsically believe in transformation and change. And I also know that a lot of interns who come to this practice have a fair amount of our own things to work through, which both is of benefit and can also be an Achilles heel. And so I had a really good track record of being able to spot people who inside had very an open heart, a big heart,
keen instincts and to be able to train them to abide by the standards and the ethics and the legalities of the profession in order to harness that in a good way and to be able to transform that into effective work, really beautiful transformational work with clients. Despite having devoted a lot of time with this person, with this intern, having extensive conversations, there were these pieces that, either she missed, like I saw and she wasn't seeing, whether it be with clients and components of diagnostics, or in reading over her notes, like had major omissions that I would think were obvious to include. There were things going on in her personal life that at times it affected her ability to be an effective person, let alone an effective intern, and working with clients. And when I sensed and saw those things was a missed opportunity for me to terminate or at least suggest that she go handle those things in her personal life and suspend her work with clients. Though she was in her own personal therapeutic work, and that was a requirement that I couldn't contractually bind my interns to. It's something that I asked them to do as a part of our arrangement because I think it's incredibly invaluable. This was not enough in the end to compensate for what she was going through and to mitigate and reduce the possibility of what became a very dual relationship.
So it sounds like, you're stuck in, your own wishful thinking that,
Yes.
that, or the best intention that you want to build an intern. And yet, seeing all these facts that objective, and just trying to be objective, and then, you lost sight of that objectivity.
Absolutely.
So what is, what would you do differently? After you went through all these, supervised practice, and I suppose that, you learned something from it. And what would you do differently this time, when you have a similar intern? Because, there are definitely,
Yeah.
different red flags and different
Yeah.
types of, intern that will, that they require a lot more supervision.
I probably would have not taken her on to begin with, honestly, and my criteria for working with interns would change greatly. I would want to validate and verify their experience level before ever even taking them on, because there's so much responsibility that a clinical supervisor has in private practice. You don't have the containment of a mental health center and the QA resources and all of the other layers of oversight that happen when multiple eyes are auditing multiple charts and can catch things that maybe, in my humanity, I might overlook and oversee. And so first, I would choose differently. Secondly, I would have put very I would uphold the standards that were and the laws that were asked of me, which was to issue a W-2, to put some of those things in place, to more rigorously document the work that she was doing and not give her so much latitude and ask for greater accountability and more scrutiny around her documentation. And though I brought a lot of those best practices in from my community mental health work and a lot of the similar documentation, I think I would have demanded a higher level, a higher standard of performance from her. and would have corrected behavior earlier on. And if that behavior was still errant, I would have terminated my relationship, my supervision relationship with her to avoid, further damage to anyone involved.
So I have one last question.
Sure.
If you can indulge me. So, it seems like, you also talked about, that, when you're on probation, that you experience, the emotional vulnerability. So how do you take care of yourself?
Oh, I am, maybe I've learned this most from being a mother of a toddler, but I really believe that you can't give what you don't have. And I am incredibly dedicated to my own self-care between regular exercise, movement, meditation, time to myself. I regularly work with teachers and mentors. I'm very diligent about the food I eat and the practices that I take between, reflection and journaling and all the things required. I have so much in my toolbox to be able to show up for my life and what it asks of me on a daily basis. If I thought that missing a personal care chart was appropriate, I would do so, but it really is hanging up on my wall and something that I take very seriously.
How about counseling?
How about what?
Counseling,
Counseling.
therapy.
Oh yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is I have a spiritual teacher who's also she's a spiritual counselor to me, and I've been in and out of traditional therapy for, ever since I was 21. So I'm not in it all the time. I go in and out of it, but I absolutely have a lot of eyes on me, and a lot of the supervision that I've had in this process feels therapeutic to me because it touches into so many of the things that I've spoken to today. They aren't separate.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Dr. Brew, any questions?
Just a comment. Early, when you gave your initial statement, you had said that you don't plan to supervise, but I just want you to know we have to make our decision as if you're going to be in private practice and supervising and everything else, although you've been answering as if you would, so that's helpful. But I just wanted to make that clear that that's part of our decision-making process.
I understand.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so Maura Ashley, do you have any questions?
Thank you. I actually think it was answered with Christina's question in terms of, I know that you were talking about moving on to a different career path, but just wanted to know what were some of those sort of best practices and lessons learned, and I think you answered that going into the future. So thank you.
All right, Jonathan Maddox, any questions?
Good morning. Want to let you know that I also was licensed in 2003, so I actually took the last series of oral boards in October, and so we have a similar sort of licensing track and have that in common. So thank you for coming today. I have several questions. So you mentioned when you first started your conversation that you had built several programs in LA County RAP programs working with foster care youth. So my assumption is that in building those programs, that you would have understood what the Medi-Cal charting and documentation standards are for those programs. Would that be correct?
Absolutely.
It sounds, and so would you also agree that you would have gained an understanding of the role of a clinical supervisor in the life of a mental health program, that their role is the gatekeeper
Absolutely.
who ensures that there's appropriate clinical care and that for clients, and that young trainees, young interns are being sort of developed in a developmentally appropriate path so that they become competent, confident clinicians. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Okay. So could you tell me what role, when you were building these programs, did the clinical supervisors have in these programs? What actual concrete tasks were they doing as it related to interns when you were developing these programs?
Sure. Everything from hiring interns and overseeing their clinical work, and that included weekly individual supervision, hosting group supervision, reviewing charts, and ensuring best practices in documentation. It also had to do with ensuring that the agency policies and procedures as a county contract were upheld to the contract standards, and to then provide administrative oversight as far as the actual clinic went.
And so just to kind of elaborate a little, when you talk about chart reviews, so that the non-clinicians would understand what that means actually going to a chart, ensuring that there's an assessment, ensuring that there's medical necessity,
Yes.
ensuring that the symptoms that are documented in the chart align with the diagnosis,
Yes.
ensuring that there's an active treatment plan, reviewing progress notes, so that that could be a jumping off point to have certain conversations and
Yes.
supervision around the quality of care that's being provided, and to also help develop the clinician as they sort of bounce off the client and recognize things in themselves that might be triggered through the work, correct?
Absolutely, and even actually more than that, because of the high medical necessity involved with this
Foster care use.
clientele, then we had to go a step further and very much justify what diagnostically, symptomatically, that these clients required in order to justify really high levels of care.
Sure.
Yeah, so, or else we'd lose funding,
Exactly.
essentially.
Exactly. You don't want to have clients in programs where either they're being under or overserved. because
Overserved.
That's inappropriate.
Exactly.
So then my next question is, as the director, could you tell me sort of what concrete ways you supported those supervisors? And I'm going somewhere, so I'll get there. in a minute.
Sure.
Tell me how, as a director, you supported the supervisors who were supervising interns because you were managing the program. Could you talk a little bit about the tasks and things that you did with them?
Sure.
Or
I basically had my own supervision on a weekly basis with them, where we would talk about their supervision with their interns on a macro or more of a macro level.
Sure.
And I was also responsible for chart reviewing processes and on a QA level, on a quality assurance level, and also writing the policies and procedures to uphold these standards. And then I also was involved in training not only new hires, new employees, but also supervisors to make sure that these standards were upheld across the board.
Okay, so it sounds like, just to surmise everything that you said, it sounds like you are a very competent program developer. You understand the infrastructure that needs to be in place to substantiate billing needs, to reduce clawbacks and things like that from the state. Okay, so with all that understood, can you help me understand, because I'm very confused about how you, in knowing all of that, had this interaction with this intern. There appeared to have been either sporadic or incompetent supervision. There's appeared to be a lack of a reviewing of documentation. So I'm just confused how you were able to compartmentalize on one point your competence and then in this setting not do any of that. So could you help me understand how that happened?
There was a lot of deceit.
On whose part?
On the intern very blatantly omitted major pieces of information during our supervision, which then came out in the process of this case.
Can I slow you down? Was supervision in person?
There was supervision in person. It was not always in person.
What other venues did you have supervision with him?
By phone and by Skype.
Go ahead.
And so when we were in person was when I would review her documents and her oversight of the client. I was totally, and I can't even describe how shocked I was to an extent around some of these accusations of what the client told me happened between she and the intern, because it was the first that I had learned that supervision, or not supervision, that the client contact took place in certain places.
Can I
So-
slow you down? Because I'm getting a little confused. Because
Sure.
you initially started talking about supervision, and then you jumped to a conversation that the client was having with you. Can we back up to supervision?
Sure.
Because that's one little further
The
than I asked.
intern omitted major components of
Okay.
information during supervision.
Would it be fair to say that her documentation standards would not have been up to the standard that you would have set in your mental health program in that setting?
Correct.
Okay. So can you tell the board, help us understand what steps you took when you initially found out that the documentation standards were substandard? What did you do to address that?
I coached her very directly. I gave her standards that I had written in the community mental health setting to train her. I basically took all of the documents that I had created for new hires and trainees and I went over that with her extensively. And despite having, and this was to my initial statement, despite having given this to her, despite having covered this with her, she was still not at the standards that would have been acceptable and were acceptable. And so we worked on it tremendously, actually. It
Oh.
wasn't something that I didn't have two separate standards. My statement really is that I overestimated my ability to mentor and supervise her, that I went to what I feel was great lengths to encourage her and do pretty much exactly what I would have done in the other setting. And with this intern, it did not.
Okay. Okay.
It,
So I
it did
appreciate-
not land.
So I appreciate you acknowledging that. So what I'm hearing is a couple of things. I'm hearing, one, that you were neglectful in your role as a supervisor to not only coach, but to actually take other concrete evidence-based steps that a supervisor would take, meeting more frequently for supervision, bringing all of the case documentation to supervision to review. You neglected to do all of that at the same time.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. And then, almost lastly, could you tell me a little bit more, when your intern suggested that she wanted to transition to life coach from therapist, like, what did you say to her? Like, could you give us just a tidbit if we were a fly on the wall? Like, what was that conversation like? Because as a clinician and a supervisor and program manager, I'd be very interested to know what you said.
I asked her to tell me what she thought that meant. Like, what definition would she give to what a wellness coach is? And she explained what she thought that was, and I felt like that was not psychotherapy. And we went further into delineating what was and was not appropriate to talk about if she were to pursue that, as in not diagnostically, not treating, if she were to perceive that this client needed a higher level of care because she was regressing in her progress, that meant that we would have to refer her out. We tried to define what that meant, and at that time I was confident that she was capable of doing that, especially with this client who had stabilized for quite some time.
Okay, thank you. Two more questions, I promise. Famous last words. So this interaction occurred in your private practice, correct? If I'm right?
Correct.
So were you receiving a part of the payment that came from the client because she was your intern? Like, were you getting a percentage of that? Was there a financial incentive in the interns that were working for you?
Was there a I had an agreement with them. I guess you could say it was a financial incentive.
Like, for example, like if the fee was $50, like the intern might get 35 and then you get 15 because ultimately it's your company.
It was more of a percentage than it was a flat rate, correct?
Okay. So okay. All right. That's my last question. So I think my final comment will be, I'm still not clear on how someone with such strong industry standards and training was able to allow something like this to occur in their own private practice. I'm unclear. There must have been numerous red flags that had arisen during the course of the work with this intern. Oh, I do remember my last question. That either were overlooked or just not seen. And so I'm wondering, did you notice any red flags with either her care or her, well, you clearly admitted the documentation was a standard. Did you notice? So then I've answered my question. So you did notice red flags. My question is, what kept you from terminating this intern in your business and saying, this person is doing damage to this client, this person is not maintaining industry standards, they are not appropriate to practice? What kept you from doing, at least in that setting, what kept you from doing that?
When I spoke with this client, she, towards the end of this work with her, she went on extensively to talk about all of the good work that they have done and all of the progress that she had made. And the documentation that was in the very beginning of when this client began versus when she, or I should say along the way, showed a very steady improvement. And so I perceived that despite some of the red flags that I've mentioned, that this client was progressing and improving, and that she was moving forward in her care. She was very articulate about how much she had gained from this process, and that she, and her work with this intern, she was very explicit about how she went from not being able to leave her home and was had repetitive behaviors that prevented her from being in public, to now considering having a job. And so on a functioning scale, as a clinician, I perceived that her functionality and her functionality had improved and her symptoms had decreased, and that she was progressing. And so that overrode in retrospect, that overrode some of the red flags that I saw. And again, I had provided too much freedom. I overestimated my ability to properly supervise her. And then when these accusations came out, and so many things that I didn't know about, despite having done what I thought was proper, had come out, I was, like I said, in one instance shocked because of the depth of what had happened, but in another way, not completely surprised because of the red flags. And then when I learned of this, I immediately put a plan of correction in place, and shortly thereafter stopped working with this intern altogether when all of this came up to the surface. I was very, very inclined to do corrective plans of action with my interns, and did so with a lot of, and had done so along the way, and had documented the standards that I wanted her to uphold. This wasn't the first time that I had, or the only time that I had been very explicit about wanting her to improve and get better.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. And then finally, I'll say, it sounds like, and my guess is that it's very difficult to have a full-time job and manage a private practice, because I've done that too, and I know that private practice can take a toll on you in ways that's very draining. But with that said, it sounds like you had, and I appreciate you admitting it, and I'm just going to reiterate that you had significantly advocated your responsibility as a supervisor to not only protect the development of this intern, but also protect the quality of care that was happening to this client. And to me, that's very concerning. So I want to thank you for sharing today. And I'm done.
All right, Ms. Tyner, do you have any questions?
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Tyner, did you have any closing remarks you want to make?
The people have completed their presentation. Thank you.
All right. Well, then, Ms. Plancich, I'll give you the final word. Anything you want to say before we finish?
I don't know how to more accurately convey that I have very much invested myself in looking at this matter very deeply, and that I have, for the past 2.5 years, invested a tremendous amount of myself into looking at the very things that are perplexing about why somebody who had had such a track record of high qualities of care and supervision could have lapsed in this instance. And all I can say is that I am very sorry, and that I've done what I feel is very comprehensive and thorough examination of this, and that I have done my very best to integrate these lessons into my life with humility and integrity, and see very clearly where I fell short and was remiss and neglectful. And I intend to move forward with that very seriously, professionally and personally. Thank you.
All right. With that, the hearing is concluded. We'll go off the record. All right. Thank you very much. You're free to go. If you all want to stretch, that'd be fine, but please don't leave the hearing room. We're going to start with Emily Mann in just 2 or 3 minutes.
Dr. Wisslerbach?
All right. You're Emily Mann? Okay. Good morning. Let's go on the record. The hearing is open now in the matter of the petition of Emily Mann. The case number is 2002-016-000-628. The OAH number is 2018-040272. This is a petition before the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and today is May 9th, 2018. The hearing is being conducted in Universal City, California, and my name is Matthew Goldsby. I'm the Administrative Law Judge for the hearing. Let me have appearances, please.
Good morning. Deputy Attorney General Catherine Masana, appearing on behalf of the people of the state of California, pursuant to Government Code Section 11522.
Thank you. And can you state your name and spell it?
Okay. Emily Mann, Emillymann.
All right. Good morning. Are you expecting to have an attorney represent you today?
No, Your Honor.
Were you here this morning when I explained how these hearings proceed? And
Yes, Your Honor.
do you have any questions about what's expected today and how this is going to work?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Well, then let's move forward. Ms. Masana, did you want to make an opening statement?
First, if I may, I would like to mark for identification and offer into evidence as Exhibit 1 the following documents.
All right.
It's the petition for modification of penalty without the attachments, the decision and order in case number 200-2016-000-628, the notice of hearing, and the registration history certification.
All right. I've received these documents. I've marked them as Exhibit 1. Ms. Mann, have you received a copy of these documents?
Yes, I have, Your Honor.
Do you have any objections to them coming into evidence?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So Exhibit 1 is admitted. Ms. Masana, do you have any other opening remarks you'd like to make?
If I may just provide the board and Your Honor with a brief history of the case.
Please.
Thank you. The matter before the board is a petition for modification of probation. By way of background, on August 4th of 2011, a petitioner was convicted of one misdemeanor count of violating Vehicle Code Section 23152, Subdivision B, for driving under the influence of alcohol. On or about July 26th of 2015, Ms. Mann submitted an application for registration as a marriage and family therapist intern. The board denied the application, and Ms. Mann appealed the denial. On July 20th of 2016, the board filed Statement of Issues number 200-2016-000-628, alleging that Ms. Mann's application was subject to denial for substantially related criminal conviction, dangerous use of alcoholic beverages, false statement on an application, an act which would warrant disciplinary action of one holding a license, as well as failing to disclose her conviction. Effective December 1st of 2016, the agency issued a decision and order in the matter, which issued Ms. Mann a registration, immediately revoked that registration, and placed it on probation for 3 years with terms and conditions. The probation was tolled from December 1st of 2016 to January 8th of 2017, and her probation is scheduled to terminate on January 7th of 2020. On February 23rd of 2018, Ms. Mann submitted the petition for modification of probation. Specifically, she is seeking modification of the following terms and conditions: the psychological evaluation, psychological therapy, supervision, biological fluid testing, and dependency support. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Mann, are you here to testify, to tell us a little bit about why you've petitioned?
Yes.
Then let me have you raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you give here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
All right. Since you are not represented by counsel, I will let you give your testimony in narrative style, meaning you can tell us whatever it is you think is important in whatever order you want to tell us. The board will have some questions for you, but go ahead and give us your statement.
First, I have some further documents. The petition request without attachments. I
You
have
want to
those
explain
with me.
what documents that you brought with you?
I have the court minutes showing my conviction. I have a dismissal or the expungement of a conviction, the law and ethics exam results, which I passed, the letter of support from my therapist, the letter of support from my supervisor, psychotherapy, quarterly reports, supervisor, quarterly reports, 30 hours, certificate completion of the law and ethics training, and attendance of the AA signatures. That's with the petition request. And then I have a second part that I brought in today. This is a performance evaluation by my supervisor of the past year. And then duplicate copies of the law and ethics and AA signatures. I didn't know that this petition, I didn't know it was so complete, so I just brought it in just in case.
I'm not sure I'm clear on the distinction. What's the second set of documents you have?
My supervisor performance evaluation.
Okay.
And then because when I submitted my petition request, I didn't include all of the AA signatures and law and ethics training certificates because I didn't photocopy those. And so I asked my probation monitor to send me those from my quarterly reports. But then now when I was reviewing it, I saw that he already included it in this big packet here.
All right, but it's not included, Ms. Masana, it's not included in the documents you submitted, is that correct?
The documents I submitted are just the original petition. It does not contain the attachments.
Okay, have you shared these with Ms. Masana?
Yes.
Ms. Masana, do you have any objections to these documents coming into evidence?
No objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to mark them collectively as Exhibit A, and I will admit them into evidence. So do you have copies for the board to review?
The first one that I talked about, there's only 2 copies, and then the performance evaluation and the rest of the signatures, I have 13 copies.
Why don't you hand them over to the first board member, or actually, there's somebody who's going to help you with that.
We're going to make copies? This is 1 copy of those that I will give to someone, and then these all have copies already. Okay. You're going to give it to me? Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, here's an extra.
All right. A couple of things. Our board member was raising a concern that a psych evaluation might be irrelevant.
Okay.
Is it a psychological evaluation that you, Dr. Brew?
I think that that's what you listed. The first thing that you said was a reduction in the following, and you said psychological evaluation, and it's already been done, and that wasn't something she was asking for, so I didn't know if that mattered, if it was just a
Ms. Masana, do you want to
mistake.
address that?
Yes, Your Honor. It was just listed on her petition for modification of penalty as one of the specific modifications she was asking for. So,
Not, okay, it wasn't on ours, I'm sorry, so I didn't know that.
Well,
It was already done.
I want to err on the side of taking more in than less in, so I'm inclined to go ahead and take this into evidence. So it will be included in the documents that you have presented. Let's go off the record for just 1 second. I know we have 3 more people left. If you've brought in an insufficient number of exhibits to share with the board, can you talk with staff so that we can make sure that when you come forward with your case that we have all of your documents? We don't have to take the time to do what we've been doing. We kind of stops things. So be sure to see staff and make sure your documentation is sufficient for each board member to have a copy. Okay, let's go back on the record. All right. Now we've taken into evidence the documents you wanted to bring. Do you have a statement that you'd like to give the board?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Mann. Thank you for granting me this opportunity to speak in front of you at this petition hearing. I've written a little speech because I get a little nervous talking in this big group, and so I just want to make sure I don't get lost. To be more specific about what modification I'm requesting is I wasn't aware that there wouldn't be any more psychological evaluation. I thought it'd be like a once a year thing. So yeah, that's either none. And then psychotherapy 1 time a month, dependency program AA 2 times a month, no more biological urine testing, and supervision, I said 2 times a month after I get licensed. Right now I'm still an intern or associate. Oh, sorry. Right now I'm still an intern or associate, and so I still would be getting weekly supervision, but after I get licensed, hopefully in January or February, I hope to, reduce my supervision. I think that's all I have for the modifications. I'm requesting this modification because it's been very costly and time-consuming. Between the drug testing, therapy, and probation monitoring fees, I spend about $650 a month. It's been time-consuming because I have 3 AA meetings a week, 1 hour of therapy, and 1 drug testing a week. I prefer getting drug tested on the weekends because I have more time on the weekends. If I get called in during the weekdays, I have to wake up 2 hours earlier than I normally would because I have a packed work day and because the testing sites near me close at 5 p.m. However, on Sundays, there are no drug testing sites open near me in San Francisco, a big metropolitan area. The closest site is in Newark, about 40 miles away. I have been called twice to test, and I have driven there. Likewise, I prefer going to AA meetings on the weekends when I have more time, and have actually found some really good meetings that I enjoy. I've been compliant to the best of my abilities to the terms. I did receive 2 notice violations. I received a notice violation last year on July 28, 2017, saying I didn't call to test on the weekends since February 25th, 2017. And it's a violation if I didn't call to check. So there were about 5 months I didn't call on the weekends. I wrote back an explanation saying that when my probation monitor went over the initial terms with me, she didn't tell me it was a violation not to call in. I would never have continued to not call if I knew it was a violation. I didn't call because I was never tested on the weekends back then, last year. The probation started December 1st, 2016, and every day, including the weekends, I had called until February 25th. I noticed during those 3 months that I was never drug tested on the weekends, so therefore, starting February 25th, I stopped calling on the weekends. Once I received the notice violation, I started calling right away. The second violation was last year on Monday, July 3rd, 2017, the day before 4th of July. I missed my drug testing even though I was called in. Back then, last year, there was a San Mateo clinic that was open near my work that closes at 7 p.m., which is nice because I can go after work. On that Monday, I went after work around 5:30 p.m. to find a sign saying that they were closed Monday and Tuesday for the holiday. I took a picture of the sign and mailed it in with my explanation. The other sites that I could have gone to were in San Francisco, and they close at 6 p.m., so it would have been too late. By the way, since this year, January 2018, the San Mateo Clinic was removed as one of the testing sites, so that's why I've been going to San Carlos's clinic, which closes at 5 p.m. I think the main reason why the board denied my intern status and put me on probation was because I lied on my intern application. I said, no, I was never convicted of a crime. Unfortunately, I don't have a good explanation for that, except that I was hasty and in a rush to turn in my application. I didn't have the necessary court documents to include with my application. I didn't have the necessary court documents to include with my application, and I was going to Mexico the next day for a 6-week learning Spanish program. I didn't want to delay my application, so I turned it in. I'm very sorry for this. I shouldn't have lied. It was a careless mistake. Sorry. Oh God, I didn't know I was gonna be crying.
Take your time.
I know now that the board wanted to complete background checks to keep our consumers safe, and therefore they would want therapists to be forthright about their convictions. One of the concerns you may have about me requesting for no more drug testing is, am I going to be a danger to myself or to the public or my clients, thank you, if I drink? And I want to respond with, I'm not an alcoholic. An alcoholic is someone who can't stop drinking when they want to, and they get withdrawal symptoms. I can stop after a drink. I don't need to have a drink to feel better. I don't get cravings. I don't get obsessive thoughts over alcohol or wonder when will be the next time I'll have a drink. What happened when I got the DUI was I was immature, irresponsible, and lacking judgment. I was 22. I remember it was the Thursday of finals week, and I had just finished with finals. It was the night before my college graduation, and I was out celebrating, and I drove home. It's bad because it was kind of a normal thing back then in my group of friends to drink and drive. We didn't think anything of it. It was a terrible mistake, a stupid mistake. I didn't think of consequences, of what could have happened if I got in an accident. I didn't think at all. That night was a wake-up call. That was a serious encounter, getting arrested and going to court. That scared me, and I didn't drink and drive again. After graduation, I moved back home to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was drinking less. In college, my friends and I would party or go to nightclubs, but after college, we all weren't interested in that anymore. When I first started this probation at age 27, my drinking was really minimal. It ranged from 1 to 2 drinks a month. I don't remember the exact amount, but I know I didn't drink that much. The last year in college, my friends and I were having fun, drinking, having little responsibilities, but since I had graduated, I attended graduate school, was working, and drinking just isn't part of the equation. In college, it was a different environmental setting. I was at a different developmental stage, but I was never an alcoholic. I don't have any genetic disposition to addiction. No one in my family has issues with alcohol. It was an immature college experience. I wouldn't want my kids to go through the same thing. Working with my sponsor, she asked me to make a timeline of my drinking history, like what age I started drinking, frequency of drinks, and the amount of drinks. I wrote out a timeline, and my drinking peaked when I was 22. That's when I drank the most. And every year it decreased. Age 24 was about 2 drinks a week. Age 27 was 1 to 2 drinks a month. With alcoholics, the drinking usually progresses and gets worse, with more consequences. My only consequence was the DUI, and I've learned my lesson. Going to AA, I have learned a lot about alcoholism, how it affects others, and how it takes control. I've also learned how I am different and that some of the things don't relate to me. First, I can stop after a drink. I don't drink to black out or to get drunk. I don't drink to numb my sadness, anger, anxiety, or other emotional discomforts. I use my coping skills to manage my emotional discomforts, and I talk to my social support. I'm okay with sitting with negative emotions. I talk to my work support, my coworkers and supervisor. I also talk to my therapist. I've been with this therapist 2 months before the probation started, since October 2016, so a year and a half ago. She has written my letter of support, and she doesn't think I'm an alcoholic. I know someone could try to deceive a therapist for 1.5 years. And honestly, I was really nervous coming here to say all this, because I know it can sound really out there. How am I not an alcoholic if I had a DUI? But this is my truth. The time of the DUI, I was so young and immature. I didn't have good role models. I was away from home. I was just thinking of fun. I didn't think of consequences. Now I'm 29 and have a totally different mindset. I'm getting married this year, and next year I'm hoping to start a family. I would never drink and drive again, and I wouldn't drink to the point where I feel out of control. I know my job is so important because clients depend on me. I'm responsible for people's lives. At work, I have to be mentally and emotionally clear, alert, responsible, and prepared. That's why I take excellent care of my personal life and my mental well-being, because I've seen some coworkers burn out and their personal lives bleed into their professional lives. I practice self-care. I practice excellent self-care, practice coping skills, and in general, I think rationally about a situation. I use a lot of CBT skills on myself. I try not to ruminate, assume, or blame before I understand the issue completely. I would say I don't feel stressed very often, and generally, I'm happy every day. Just to give some examples of what stressors happened lately, one of my coworkers and I attended a family meeting together, and after the meeting, she texted me, "We need to talk." Immediately, I was worried if I had said something at the meeting to offend her. And what did I do? How am I going to fix this? But she wasn't ready to talk yet, and I had to wait until the next morning. How I coped was, in order to stop ruminating and to feel more worried, I told myself not to assume things, not to assume it was my fault, and not to assume the worst. Because I think I did a good job at the family meeting, let's just wait until the next day to hear her response. The next day, the coworker did tell me what she thought I did wrong. The coworker, when she gives you criticism, she sounds like she's attacking you. And I would feel really hurt, scared, and even defensive because I'm not used to this confrontation. So how I coped was I looked at it objectively and rationally as a third person. I self-evaluate. Did she make good points? What can I do better? I decided that yes, she was right in that I should update and include my multidisciplinary team more. So I apologized to her and I said I will do better next time, and I really learned from that mistake. I also tell her in a respectful and assertive way that when she talks to me in that manner, it makes me feel uncomfortable because of X, Y, and Z. And those conflicts with her haven't happened again. And I should add that that's why my performance evaluation, one of the things that I've exceeded expectations is being a team member or teamwork. Other coping I did that day was I consulted with my supervisor, I talked to other coworkers for support, and I reached out to my own friends and boyfriend. I exercised afterward and did some relaxing. Other examples involve other personalities, and I found that the most effective tool has been to communicate and talk it out, because most of the time it's misunderstandings. I try to think of situations in other perspectives, not just my own. I pick my battles. I can accept and let go of things, let go of certain situations, and I'm humble when I'm wrong. One more example is today. I have a little fear of public speaking. Just watching the webcast online made me feel so nervous. How I coped was I prepared by writing down a speech and practiced to myself. I gave myself positive self-talk, like just speak from the heart, whatever the outcome is, it'll be okay, and just read off the paper. And afterwards, I can reward myself with some delicious LA breakfast. Before this, I also did some deep breathing exercises, which helps a lot before test taking or other nerve-wracking situations. I have a lot more to say about how I manage stressors, but I don't want to bore you. If there are follow-up questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I just want to clarify that this past year, I've come at my probation with an open and learning mind. That's my attitude about things, is to do my best and make the best out of it. Therefore, I worked with a sponsor for about 7 months, and I worked through the 12 steps. I did this because I knew I was going to be in AA for a while, attending 3 times a week, and I didn't want to be going to meetings just to get a signature. I want to encompass the whole experience. I felt like I should try to make the most out of it. The 12 steps and the big book is about a spiritual journey, strengthening your relationship with God and a higher power. That doesn't sound like only alcoholics could benefit from. Some of the steps are very therapeutic, looking at my defects, admitting my wrongs, making amends to people, and meditation. I think everyone can use that. I don't know if I'm more spiritual, but I do believe in a higher power when I didn't before. I really do enjoy some of the AA meetings. I used to share more in meetings in the beginning. I would talk about how I haven't gained spiritual awakening yet, and after the meeting, people would come up to me and point out little areas where my higher power was in fact there. They've helped me think of my spiritual journey in different perspectives. I've enjoyed the fellowship and making friends in AA. Some of the people I met and their stories have touched my heart. To summarize, I can assure the board that if you modify my terms, I can safely practice in a therapeutic setting because I understand how important my job is to keep clients safe. And that means taking care of my mental well-being first, which I do. I take my job very seriously. I have good coping skills. I practice excellent self-care. I'm a level-headed, rational person. I don't get stressed very easily, and if I do, I try to resolve it, I deal with it. I try to resolve it as best as I can. I'm also not afraid to sit with the emotional discomfort. Therefore, because of all this, I don't feel the need to drink alcohol to cover up or numb myself. That's about all I have. Please follow up with questions if you have any. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Masana, do you have any preliminary questions?
No preliminary questions, Your Honor. The people would like to defer until after the board members have had a chance to ask their questions.
All right, very good. Well, let's start with questioning from this side of the room today. Jonathan Maddox, are you ready to go?
I am. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming in today. It's been very refreshing to sort of hear your the process of reflection and sort of insightfulness that you have brought to this conversation today. It's really good to hear that you have and are thinking through sort of not only the implications of the decisions that you've made, but sort of how you got here. and are able to sort of frame it in a way that helps me understand that you have grown and are continuing to grow, along with developing the skills necessary to avoid it happening again. So that's always really good to hear. So thank you. I do have a couple of questions, and some of them are just because I don't understand or know what that means. So your probation was told at a certain point. What was the circumstances surrounding that?
December 1st, I didn't get my therapist job until January 8th, I believe, was when I was employed. So that's why the month and a week I wasn't using my intern status.
Okay, so it directly had to do with your employment status because you weren't actively using your registration. That they
Right.
just put it on hold.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
thank
right.
you. That's very helpful. And then my other question is, I'm a little confused. I didn't quite understand. I did understand somewhat that you were in a rush when you were doing your application, but I still don't understand why you were dishonest. Could you say a little bit more about why you chose to say no? Because you clearly didn't tell the truth there, and so I'm just a little confused about why you still did that. So could you help me understand better why you made that decision?
Well, it was definitely, I didn't want to delay my application. Like, after reading that statement saying if you have committed a crime, that you would have to provide court documents, and I didn't have it, and then I knew that I would have to wait until after I come back from my trip to try to get the documents and delay even further.
Sure.
And also, I was naive to say, like, the perjury part. You know, I didn't know it was such a serious matter, like, to the board that, you know, lying or saying false information under perjury. I was naive to think that the board was going to be okay with that, or that I would be able to make it up afterwards and show my court documents. I really wasn't thinking it through, and I would say I was naive.
Okay. How have you and your therapist sort of worked through how you sort of view the role of perjury and honesty in things in life? Like, what sorts of things have you guys worked on to ensure that moving forward, that becomes a non-issue for you?
Yeah, we've definitely processed, you know, how I come to terms with situations now is after that experience, learning that there are consequences and that I have to think very carefully how my actions will impact myself and others. And just, you know, just learning from that lesson. And then that's all we talk about is just learning from that lesson and trying not to do it again and taking things more seriously.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're all learning lessons, so it's not going to stop once you finish this. You'll be learning lessons the rest of your life. One last question, and so I was reading through your therapist's evaluations of sort of your treatment, and they all say the same thing. The only thing that's changed are the dates in the back. They all say you're youthful at 28, and you've been coming since December 2016. They don't really tell us anything kind of about what's been going on. So I don't have a question. I mean, you may want to consider bringing that up with her to see if there's a way she could maybe add more information to that so that they might be more useful to you, because they just seem like cookie cutter forms.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank you
definitely I will.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you for
thanks.
coming today.
Thank you.
Okay, Samara, Ashley, do you have any questions?
I do. I just have one. And thank you. Good morning. You did address sort of why some of the challenges you experienced in being youthful and immature in decision making. But one of the questions I wanted to ask is how can we be assured with the request for modification that you've brought forth today, that if we are to make those modifications, that those that would utilize your services in the future would be protected, that members of the public would be protected?
Yeah, good question. Definitely working in this field, since I had graduated graduate school and, you know, got into this field and all the trainings, I realize and I understand that my job, my professionalism has to come first. Even outside of the work environment, when I go home, even behind closed doors, I need to act professional. That, you know, our job, we have to abide by the law more than other professions. And I take that really seriously now. And I didn't know that before. And so, yeah, so even how I carry myself on social media or behind closed doors, you know, or with friends outside, I have to always remember that I am a therapist. I have to be professional. I can't lead two different lives. Like, you know, in session at work, working with my clients and empathic listening and giving them good techniques and working together. I can't go home and do whatever I want. I have to make it congruent. And yeah. So, does that answer?
It's fine.
Any other questions? Let's turn to Dr. Brew. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I have a few. So when I was looking at the decision and order, it didn't have supervised practice, and I noticed you have quarterly reports. So I'm a little confused about that.
I think after the psychological evaluation, she recommended having supervise or, you know, to be supervised every week. And I also let her know that I am getting supervised.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just
But
not,
in the decision, it's not in there, the supervised?
no, because it would have come, if it's from the psychological evaluation,
Oh.
it wouldn't have, we didn't get the psychological evaluation, so we wouldn't have known that.
Okay.
And then, so was the purpose of the supervision because of the dishonesty piece then? I mean, it's just not very traditional for an intern because you're already being supervised. That's why I'm kind of confused.
Right, yeah.
We don't typically do that. So there, it felt like there must have been a compelling reason, and I wondered if you could give me clarity as we think about adjusting that.
Yeah. I don't know why she put that on, and we really didn't talk about the dishonesty on the application. We mostly talked about the DUI and the
Okay.
alcohol use. And so I don't know if she's ever been, you know, evaluating for the board before, but she was a little unclear when I tried to clarify, like, after I get my license, you know, I would like to not have supervised or, you know, weekly supervision. Can you include that in the report? And she said, whatever the board wants to decide on your intern, your license, I don't have control. She wasn't really understanding my request about the after I get license. So I feel like she was making a request for supervision because I'm already getting it, and she just wants to continue that. But I don't know. I don't
Okay,
know.
you didn't get to read the report.
Uh-uh.
Okay, all right. That's really difficult then. Then a couple of other questions. I noticed you had requested therapy once a month and the dependency support twice a month. And I'm curious about it because as someone who, while you've talked about how beneficial the dependency support group has been and that you've really made use of it, typically therapy is more fruitful for someone who doesn't identify as having a problem with an addiction. So I'm a little confused about why it wouldn't be like keep my therapy and get rid of dependency support.
I feel like I don't have a lot of issues to work on in therapy. I've been in therapy, you know, I started in graduate school because we would get 10 free sessions a semester. And I really enjoyed it. I took advantage of it. I had a really great therapist who wasn't an intern, and she would ask a lot of provocative questions. It made me think a lot about different perspectives. That's where I first got into thinking about different perspectives and letting go of control. And then after graduate school, maybe about like 6 months or 7 months into my job as a case manager, I went back to find a therapist because I wanted to get work support. And then we reduced to every other week. And then now working with this therapist, you know, I just don't feel like I have a lot of issues that come up to talk about. One time a month would be like minimal, but if I do feel as needed, I would definitely call her, text her to meet up. But yeah, I just feel like I don't have a lot of issues. Like work is good, my relationships are good. My mom, that was another issue I would talk about a lot. My mom and I are good. So that's why, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So then why not ask for the elimination of it?
I feel like the board would want me to still continue therapy,
Okay.
and they would want to see that I'm still trying. Like,
Okay.
yeah. And that's why the dependency, I didn't want to eliminate either, even though I don't have an alcohol issue. I still want to show the board that I'm still going. And, especially from 3 times a week so often to 0, I thought it would be kind of impossible.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, Christina Long, do you have any questions?
I need to turn on my mic. So, thanks for coming to the board to speak with us. So I'm going to ask the same question, for the previous probationer. So what is your sobriety date?
I believe it's November 11, 2016.
November 11, 2016.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, any particular reason, why you would be stopped drinking on that day? Because it seems like it's not any relevant, it's not like, any significant event.
Oh, it was a Friday. I believe it was someone's birthday. Yeah. I think it was 2 weeks before the probation started, and so I wanted to give enough time, and yeah, it was a celebration.
Okay. So you're about a year and a half, for your from the date of your sobriety.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, 2 days from now will be
Yeah.
a year and a half.
So so you speak a lot about your immaturity, leading to drinking, leading to that DUI events, and and your dishonesty, and you were required by the board to be put on different activities to address the the alcohol issue and to make sure that you're safe to practice. So I just want to pick your brain and see what do you feel that you benefit the most in understanding about yourself, your alcoholism.
Definitely the AA groups. Hearing so many stories. In the beginning, it was very like, I was really trying to be open and listen to the similarities. They say listen to the similarities, not the differences. And, I really enjoy, as a therapist, I enjoy hearing those kind of stories and the journey of the self-awareness and the process of growing. And I would relate to some of the stories, but then there would always be like that part where I would stop relating when, like I said before, when it was out of control or if it was progressing or if they were drinking because they were angry or sad. And, and then I would be like, okay, I'm not an alcoholic, but there's still things that I can learn from that. Sorry, you're asking like how it relates to my alcohol use, right?
Also, your personal and your alcohol issues. So I'm just trying to see, because you were put, on two,
Yeah.
different activities.
Yeah.
I just want to see, which you feel that, you benefit the most. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I guess like, a lot of the stories like in the beginning started off similar. My college fun days and, the irresponsibleness and like consequence. And so I just learned that, I definitely learned that, if I had a different family situation or if I was put into maybe like a different environment, like maybe I would have turned out like them. I was kind of like, wow, like, I don't know, it's hard to describe about that kind of gratefulness, but also like a moving aspect to learn. But, just regarding my alcohol use, like just the lack of thinking, just, short-term thinking, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer better.
You actually answered my question. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Betty Connolly, do you have any questions?
No, I don't, thank you.
All right. Deborah Brown, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Dr. Peter Chu?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry. Well, first of all, thanks for coming today. I'm still trying to understand, whether you perceive yourself of having a problem with alcohol because you briefly described your relationship with alcohol. So it's very important for me to understand in order for me to consider your request. So please bear with me. So when you were young in college, so you drank and you said just for fun. So how much did you drink or how often you get drunk?
I would say when I turned 21,
Mhm.
like my junior year, I drank more. And I would drink, maybe I would go out, once a weekend.
Mhm.
And you want to know like how many drinks I would have?
Yeah, just give me some because I want to see
Yeah.
your progression because
Oh,
you
yeah.
mentioned about your history.
Yeah, I wasn't I didn't have like a high tolerance, so I would have maybe 3 drinks that night, and I would, be feeling pretty good. And then my 4th year, it progressed to I would go out 2 or 3 times a week, and I would still drink 3 times, 3 drinks that night. And I would say that I don't have an alcohol problem because after that, I don't feel the need to drink to have fun, and just like, yeah, just like the thought of like just going out, staying out late, or in a crowded space like that, it wasn't as appealing anymore, and it wasn't as fun. So I would definitely say it was like unique to just the college experience.
So you said throughout the years, then the amount of drinking reduced. Now you're 27, so it's kind of like the curve is kind of like going down. So that's what I understand you said. The reason why I ask this question is that let's say you're off probation or we eliminate the term of testing. Would you resume drinking and under what circumstances? And, well, maybe you should just answer those 2 first.
Well, I know that the terms is still to abstain from drinking and using substances, so I wouldn't want to drink. And I don't feel the need to be drinking either. Like even before the probation started, I had like 1 to 2 drinks a month. So I don't feel the need to drink. It's quite easy for me to follow the abstinence.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess, it's always difficult for me to determine whether someone will have problems with alcohol, but your own assessment is that even you're off probation, you're still probably going to have 1 or 2 drinks a month. That's the best assessment you have about yourself at this time. And am I right about that?
After I get off probation, I probably would have even less than 1 to 2 drinks a month. And it's because I do like certain beers,
Uh-huh.
but I don't think I have an issue with alcohol. I would just have 1. And I don't foresee like, like what happened like when I was younger is like drinking overboard or drinking and driving. Like I would never do that again, especially, if I want to have a family, I'm going to be responsible. And like I said before, I don't have that craving, to get that buzz or to get that feeling from the drink. So definitely, like, I think after probation, I think it would even diminish. And yeah, even like, 30, 40 years old, I wouldn't be drinking probably. It would just kind of decline, I think.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Dr. Wilsbach?
Just thank you for coming in. All my questions have been answered. So
All right.
thank you.
Renee Lahner, do you have any questions?
Thank you. No question.
All right, Ms. Masana, do you have any follow-up questions?
I don't have any questions, Your Honor.
Do you have any closing remarks?
No, the people have completed their presentation. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Mann, is there anything else that you want to say that you haven't had a chance to say before we finish up?
No, Your Honor, I'm good.
All right, in that event, we're going to conclude the hearing and go off the record.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are free to go.
Thank you very much.
Before we take a break, let's, Selena Horton, you're here, and Robert Thompson Nelson, you're here, and you've been waiting very patiently. Is there a third? Are you here for a case, or are you just observing? She's with the board. I didn't, I thought you might be maybe I didn't know. Okay, I don't think we're going to get to you before the lunch hour. Why don't you find a place to lunch and come back? I think what I'd like to propose we do for the next 20 minutes is start deliberating on one of the matters that we've heard until the lunch break, okay? So we're going to need to clear out the hearing room for anybody who's not a board member, including you.
Let me ask this. Sabina, Ms. Knight? Ms. Knight?